Donald Trump has ruled out Ukraine joining NATO or regaining control of Crimea as part of a potential peace agreement with Russia. His announcement on social media comes ahead of his White House meeting with the Ukrainian leader. Volodimir Zelenskyy is under pressure to make concessions after the US president said that President Zelenskyy can end the war almost immediately. The last time he visited the Oval Office, he received a dressing down from his host. This time, he's bringing backup.
Your country is in big trouble.
Desperate to avoid a repeat of his last White House bust-up, this time Volodymyr Zelenskyy is bringing backup to deal with Donald Trump. A full posse of European leaders are set to join him in Washington, united in their support of Ukraine, but varied in their approach to US diplomacy. For Friedrich Merz, it was a friendly reminder of Trump's German heritage, gifting his grandfather's birth certificate during their Oval Office meeting in June, while also pushing for peace in Ukraine.
America is again in a very strong position to do something on this war and ending this war.
Emmanuel Macron tried to talk in terms that might appeal to Trump during his own turn in the hot seat.
Because, this war costed all of us a lot of money. And this is the responsibility of Russia, because the aggressor is Russia.
Keir Starmer proved popular for passing on an invite from the British royal family, while Italy's Giorgia Meloni has been dubbed the EU's Trump whisperer for her close relationship with the US president. Beyond the White House, Finland's Alexander Stubb has bonded with Trump on the golf course. And NATO chief Mark Rutte, who will also be in Washington, has made sure to praise the president's approach to peace.
Daddy has to sometimes use strong language.
You have to use strong language. Every once in a while you have to use a certain word.
Strong words and diplomatic tactics will likely be key in Monday's talks as European leaders back Ukraine in its most crucial moment yet in ending Russia's invasion.
All right, let's assess where we are and look ahead to today's White House meeting with DW correspondents Nimisha Jaiswal in the Ukrainian capital, Lisa Louis, who's in Riga, where our Russia team's been based since being banned from reporting from Moscow. Welcome both. Let's start with you, Nimisha, in Kyiv. Donald Trump putting the pressure on the Ukrainian president, saying on social media that Volodymyr Zelenskyy can end the war now. Does this mean he's going to be forced to cede territory to Russia?
Well, Phil, according to U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, this is a stupid media narrative that European leaders are heading to D.C. with Zelenskyy to protect him from being bullied by Trump. But let's step back and look at the bigger picture here. It's been widely reported that Putin wants all of the Donbass. It's worth mentioning that Ukraine still controls about 30% of Donetsk, including key cities like Pokrovsk and Sloviansk and Kramatorsk. And there's a serious concern here that Russia would use this territory as a launching pad for future attacks. But even if they were to try to cede this territory, as Zelenskyy has repeatedly pointed out, it's not possible, it's not legal, because it needs parliamentary backing as well as a referendum of the people that has to be free and fair. So it is very unlikely that Zelenskyy would want to cede this territory. Even the question of freezing the current front lines in a de facto way without legal recognition is something that has no legal precedence in Ukraine. Can Zelenskyy just sign over de facto recognition? Does he need parliamentary approval? All of this will have to be figured out, and that is what Zelenskyy is heading over to D.C. to find out.
Lisa Louis in Riga, President Trump says Crimea is gone for Ukraine and Ukraine will not be joining NATO. How's that being seen in Russia?
Well, Russian commentators clearly see this as a victory. Just like the Alaska summit last week, they are saying that was a rupture in the united front against Russia. They're also saying that there is a US president that understands the Russian position. As Nimisha just mentioned, Russia wants to incorporate 4 other regions, including the Donbass. They've also been asking since the start of the Russian invasion in February 2022 for regime change. They want Zelenskyy gone. This is hardly obviously something that the Ukrainians and the Europeans will agree to.
Nimisha, President Zelenskyy has welcomed the idea of security guarantees. What can the West provide that would be acceptable to Ukraine?
Well, this is a particularly important one, Phil, because Ukrainians are coming from a mindset of once bitten, twice shy. There have been guarantees before, for example, in the Budapest Memorandum of '94, and they didn't quite work out, as we saw with what happened in Crimea. So there is, of course, a lot of thankfulness coming from the Ukrainians as well as from the European leaders that the US has expressed an interest in supporting security guarantees. When Zelenskyy landed in DC, he said that he would like security guarantees in the land, in the sea and by air. But it is exactly, and this was why there was this push to join NATO, right? They wanted Article 5 guarantees, not Article 5-like guarantees. So we'll find out how firm those really can be. Europeans have also said they would deploy a reassurance force to Ukraine, but will this force be armed? Will there be boots on the ground? All of these are questions that Ukrainians are waiting to hear answers from, but it's definitely a really high priority for all Ukrainians that firm security guarantees are provided. And another key point could be arming Ukraine to the teeth, because even if other powers are not willing to step up, it's clear that Ukrainians have a will to fight.
And Lisa Louis, Russia having categorically ruled out the idea of Western troops in Ukraine, will this require Vladimir Putin to back down on that?
Well, it's not entirely clear how he will react. For now, Russian papers are just reporting that this is an option. One commentator even suggested that Chinese troops could be sent to Ukraine. That is hardly something, again, that Ukraine and the Europeans will accept. Mind you, Putin has been, and the Kremlin, they have been turning things upside down. They've been saying, you know, it's not Ukraine that needs security guarantees, Russia needs security guarantees. When the Russian side started the invasion of Ukraine back in February 2022, they were saying that they felt threatened by NATO and by Ukraine, and that's why they're putting this forward again now. Both sides seem to be really far away from each other. It's very hard to see how they will find a compromise.
Nimisha, today's White House meeting, let's have a look at that. Volodymyr Zelenskyy turning up mob-handed with European leaders. What are they hoping to achieve?
Well, it's this elaborate dance, isn't it, Phil? It's always asserting what you want and then saying, thank you so much, Trump and America, for helping us. For example, Trump's backed off from the ceasefire, and now they're using different words like cease the fire, stop the killing, and that's what they're still hoping to achieve. They would also want to make sure that Zelenskyy is not coerced into ceding land that he can't cede, and also the Europeans being there as an assertion saying, we are here, we will back him, you need to step up and help as well.
Lisa Louis, final word from you. We've talked about Ukrainian concessions. In anything that has leaked out of last week's meeting, is there any indication of a concession from Russia?
None whatsoever. And that is also what commentators had been announcing. They were saying Vladimir Putin will not cede any ground. For now, it looks like the Russian side is quite happy that we're now talking more about a peace deal than a ceasefire, because they're determined to push forward at the front to create a fait accompli. So they're just waiting there and not ceding any ground for now.
Thanks, Lisa. Lisa Louis in Riga, Nimisha Jaiswal in Kyiv. Thanks both. Well, Fabrice Pothier is a former director of policy planning at NATO. He's currently CEO at Rasmussen Global. Welcome back to DW. Donald Trump's envoy, Steve Witkoff, has suggested the US could offer Article 5-like protection, similar to NATO's mutual defence clause. What might that look like?
Well, I think this is exactly what President Zelenskyy is going to try to define and to get from President Trump. And for that, he will have the support and the presence of some European leaders. That's obviously a critical point and a critical asset for President Zelenskyy to have when and if he enters bilateral negotiation with Russia. Without that, he is obviously not in a diplomatic position of strength, but with some US guarantees plus European commitments to Ukraine security, he can enter these talks with Russia in a much stronger position. So I think this is what is at play here.
European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen is attending these talks in Washington. The EU, of course, not a military bloc. So what kind of role might it take when it comes to security guarantees for Ukraine?
Well, it's important to note that the EU itself has signed a bilateral security agreement with Ukraine, part of these 30-plus bilateral agreements, which proudly my firm, Rasmussen Global, has helped work with President Zelenskyy and his team to negotiate and to establish. So the EU is a co-signatory of the current framework. What the EU has really made a difference is that by being a huge source of finances and, in a way, political impulse to get Ukraine both the financial but also the military aid it needs. So in that sense, it is very important. It's not just symbolic, but very relevant that the EU is present at the table.
Steve Witkoff also mentioned a peace deal could include Russian guarantees not to violate any European borders. Do you think that's going to be sufficient to reassure European leaders?
I don't think a Russian commitment or guarantee would be worth the paper it's written on. And that's, I think, pretty clear, not just for the Ukrainians, who have been, obviously, as we know, sadly betrayed many times by Russia, but also for most, if not all, European leaders, with few exceptions. So I don't think that's seen as anything significant. What is really important is that Ukraine has the means to have military forces strong enough to defend itself, and that Ukraine can also lean on its European and North American allies to actually come to its rescue if needed, and to have a deterrence effect vis-à-vis possible future Russian aggression.
And just to be clear where we are in this process, President Zelenskyy and the various European leaders turn up at the White House today. President Trump pitches the deal that he's agreed with Russia to his audience. They go away and say, yes, we'll think about it, or no, this is completely unacceptable. More talks, and all that has to happen before there is any notion of further talks between, direct talks between Ukraine and Russia.
Well, I think we're at a critical moment because clearly President Trump did not come out well out of his summit with President Putin, where President Putin stood his ground and actually deleveraged Trump. And now any U.S. threats of sanctions or extra military support clearly has not been taken seriously by President Putin. So Trump's position has been considerably softened, not to say weakened, by Putin, who played his hand very well. So now the problem is Trump is going to try to turn on Zelenskyy and to twist his arm, because he can do that much better than twisting President Putin's arm. And the risk here is that obviously he plays hard, and that Zelenskyy has to make concessions that politically are just not possible in Ukraine. You cannot make territorial compromise, especially if you don't have some form of guarantees. And this is what I think President Zelenskyy is going to try to reverse, going from Trump leaning on him from compromise to him actually obtaining and asking for US security guarantees that will become and support European guarantees, giving Zelenskyy a much stronger position in possible negotiation with Putin. So again, this negotiation today is about turning the dynamic from Trump leaning hard on Zelenskyy to Zelenskyy trying to pocket new US commitments to Ukraine's future.
Good talking to you, Fabrice. Thanks for talking us through that so clearly. Fabrice Pothier from Rasmussen Global.
Thank you very much.